Come on, just like the old days.
I'm too big now, Dad. There's no way.
Come on, boy. Leap. Do it. Atta boy. Come on, Bart. You call that a leap?
Am I in some sort of alternate universe? Does that look like the Simpsons that you grew up watching? Seriously, it's wild how many of the characters from our childhood started out looking totally different before becoming the versions that we all recognise today. In this video, we're going through 8 cartoon characters whose original designs were so far from what they eventually ended up with. Even putting both versions side by side almost feels different. And one on this list changed completely, even including their name. Tom has been chasing Jerry for decades, and the original design from that very first cartoon was noticeably more realistic than the version that eventually became iconic. The early Tom had rounder and more normal proportions, and the overall feel of him was considerably less exaggerated than what he looked like later on in that show. It worked perfectly fine for what the show was doing at that time. Then after, his face became wider and more capable of taking in facial expressions in a way that read clearly on screen. His body also became more flexible and able to move in ways that served the show very well. And also, Tom became more expressive in exactly the ways the show needed him to be.
Around here, there ain't no cat, no place, no house, no ma'am.
The changes followed what the show had already been doing rather well, rather than trying to redirect it somewhere new, and it was the right call every time. But here's what we need to talk about, because this is going to bother you once you see it, if you haven't already noticed it.
That's quite big.
Tom has a white marking on his forehead, right over there. He has had it since the very beginning of the show. It survived every single production change made, and the majority of people who've watched Tom and Jerry since childhood have never once realised that it's there. It's sitting directly on his face, in plain sight, and yet nobody notices it. How? How has this gone unnoticed for so long? We at Not Fair Studios are choosing to be upset about this on Tom's behalf, and we think that it's completely reasonable. Everything around that marking changed over the years, but the marking itself never moved an inch. The next character also had something hidden inside their design that most people missed for years. Most people think they know what Finn looked like from the beginning of Adventure Time, but the version that actually came first is different from the character everyone knows.
Kid.
The original short pilot that aired on Nicktoons had a version of Finn that came with a completely different name. He was called Penn, and not Finn. And the design also reflected a character that was still being figured out, rather than one that had been fully locked in.
Algebraic! Look, it's Princess Bubblegum's Rainicorn. She looked like she was crying.
Well, let's go cheer her up. To the max.
Yeah.
Think about it. The main character of one of the most beloved shows of the era was almost called Penn. That is one of the worst names for a kid who spends his entire life running into dungeons and fighting things. The name Finn at least sounds like someone who goes on adventures. Penn sounds like someone who does your taxes. Renaming him was the right call, and whoever made that decision deserves some credit for it. The differences that are seen are worth going through properly, starting with his hat. In the pilot episode, it was more rounded on top, and the face opening of it was a rough semicircle rather than the clean, perfect circle that became part of the character's recognisable look. Also, Penn had a full set of straight teeth in the pilot episode, which sounds like a small thing until you realise that the slightly goofy gap-toothed smile that Finn eventually rocked had become a core part of his face. His body was noticeably thinner and looked more stretched out than the new version. When the show moved to Cartoon Network for its full series run, the character was renamed Finn and also had a missing tooth. All these changes sound minor in isolation, but together they add up to Finn, who feels considerably more settled than the pilot version. Pen was more like a prototype, and Finn was like the finished version. Porky Pig in 1935 looked noticeably different from the Porky Pig that we know now. His original design was very wide and round, with large, hollow, pie-shaped eyes that gave him a slightly dazed expression that didn't say much beyond the fact that he was a pig in a cartoon show. Also, his proportions were considerably heavier, at least compared to what he eventually became. And there wasn't a lot of personality being shown through his old looks either, which is a real problem when Porky is supposed to carry an entire series on his own.
My name is... Morty.
The redesign that came a couple of years later changed the situation entirely. He became slimmer and more compact, and he also began showing a range of emotions, rather than just one fixed expression like the old ones.
Which way did they go? Which way did they go? They went that way, Sheriff. You can head them off at the pass. Now wait a minute.
The new version had also had a likeness to it that the original completely lacked. Porky went on to become the first Looney Tunes character to achieve genuine star power off the back of that redesign, which says everything about how much the original look was holding him back.
Ooh, the dirty double-crosser.
It's worth noting that the original design wasn't doing the job, and once it was fixed, everything else followed fairly quickly. But while Porky's transformation was done deliberately to save a character who was clearly not working, the next family on this list had a transformation that happened while they were already on television, in front of an audience who watched it all happen. Homer and Bart Simpson are probably the most recognisable cartoon father and son ever designed, which makes it genuinely interesting to go back and look at the very first time that they appeared and see how differently they actually looked.
You never... What's the past tense of leap? Leapt? Leaped? That doesn't sound right. Well, what do you know? Leaped and leapt. They're both right.
There's definitely something wrong with Homer's face. It's not quite looking normal, and the overall looks of the family had an unfinished quality. And there was even something wrong with the colour quality during that time. In the later series, Homer's face became more expressive and more consistent throughout the show, and Bart's became more approachable. And the whole family settled into a look that has been recognisable all over the world for decades. It's Homer and Bart who went through the most visible changes of anyone in the household. Lisa and Marge's looks stayed relatively stable throughout the whole process, but we shouldn't forget about Marge's hair. It was there from the very first time the family appeared, completely unchanged, while everything around it was being reviewed and adjusted.
How many times do I have to tell you kids? I absolutely forbid burping in this household.
Some things get decided once, and that's the end of it. Isn't that right, Not Fair Family? The version of The Simpsons that we all grew up watching has been on screen long enough that it replaced the original one in most people's memory without anyone even noticing it ever happening. The Simpsons went through a visible transformation before they became the version that everyone knows today. The next one's design changed so slowly across so many years that most people watching the show never even realised it was happening at all.
Boy, that Minnie Mouse, she's smoking.
She sure is. Wait, what?
Oh, yeah, that girl's on fire.
Now, look here.
No, look there.
Mickey Mouse is probably the most recognisable cartoon character ever made, which makes it genuinely interesting to go back and look at the old version and see how different he actually was. There was something slightly off about his old Mickey Mouse design, just in the sense that the character couldn't communicate as much through his expression, like his later versions eventually did. The transition from that original design to the Mickey everyone knows today happened over a long period of time, with no single dramatic moment of change, which is actually what makes it so striking when you put both versions next to each other. The addition of movable pupils to Mickey's eyes made a real difference to how expressive the character could be on screen, which made him able to show where he's looking at and what he's reacting to, and the overall look started to become cleaner and more consistent from one production to the next. What's interesting about Mickey's evolution is how much stayed exactly the same through all of it. The red shorts and large yellow shoes that he wore were there starting from the episodes where they first showed colour, and they're still there now, unchanged while adjustments were done to everything else. The core of Mickey Mouse was clearly decided early and was held on to firmly, even when the face and proportions drifted further and further from where they started. Mickey's transformation was gradual enough that it happened largely without many fans not realising.
Wait a minute!
The next character barely changed at all, but once you see the changes, it's surprisingly hard to let go of them. Applejack was supposed to be the most grounded and consistent character in the show My Little Pony, but going back to the first season and comparing it to where the characters end up, the differences are more noticeable than most people remember. The changes made weren't that dramatic, but they were really built up gradually.
Here! This beach doesn't feel very safe. Gotta keep looking.
The most obvious change done was the cowboy hat, which most people assume was always part of her look, just because it became so associated with Applejack. But it wasn't there in the first season. Applejack in season 1 had no hat at all, and the version of the character that everyone pictures when they think of Applejack is the one with the hat sitting on her head, which came in later as the show developed her identity further. Once the hat arrived, it stuck to her head permanently, and at this point it's genuinely difficult to picture her without it.
Pop said sometimes the hat chooses the pony when he gave me this.
Her colour also changed noticeably across the early seasons. The earlier seasons had a softer and more washed out orange than what became standard later in the series. As the show progressed, her colour became richer and more saturated, and putting both versions side by side makes the difference immediately clear. The later version reads warmer and more confident on screen, and it also fits the character considerably better than the flatter earlier version ever did. And then there's also the way she talks.
Get back here, you thieving varmints!
In the first season, Applejack had a southern accent and used farm expressions, but it was relatively mild compared to what it eventually became. By the later seasons, Applejack's accent got considerably thicker, and the farm vocabulary she used expanded significantly.
Gall darn minute. Oh, just dandy. A little slow starting, but peachy all the same.
That being said, the next two characters were carrying completely different names and designs that looked nothing like the characters everyone eventually came to know.
What was that?
Death.
What kind?
Instant.
Not a f***ing god.
You don't know what I am. You don't know what I can do. It's cool, Rick.
I'm going to kill you.
Then come to 312 Olive Street.
Is that her address?
You don't know because you're a bad son. Ow.
Rick and Morty is one of the most successful shows of the past decade, and Rick and Morty being at the centre of the show has made it reach a different level, where people who have never even watched the show know roughly what they look like. They're usually known for Rick being drunk and Morty being the nervous kid in that yellow shirt.
Look at this, Morty. Look at my f***ing hand.
Why do you keep doing this to us?
I don't know, Morty. Maybe I hate myself.
Those designs feel completely locked in now, like there was never any other version of them, and there couldn't have been. Except there absolutely was. And it's way more wild than most people realise. Before Rick was Rick and before Morty was Morty, they were called Doc and Marty.
I can't. I hate this stupid tree. I'm so sad.
Don't be sad, Marty. We'll go back in time.
All right, Doc, that sounds great.
I'm gonna go get my boots.
Doc had the basic shape of what eventually would become Rick with the wild hair and the lab coat, but the whole design had a scrappy low-budget quality. Marty had a completely different look that bore very little resemblance to the Morty the whole world eventually came to know. Neither of them had been designed with any expectation that they would still be on the screen decades later.
Marty, we have a problem. The time travel car won't start. Oh no! What can we do? Trapped bloody testicles, Marty. What? I need you to lick them. Oh my god.
Then afterwards, Doc became Rick Sanchez and Marty became Morty Smith. The design of both characters was cleaned up and given the more polished style that the show maintained and improved across its entire run.
Learned about your job in school. You're a civil servant. We're technically your boss. Oh, I got pubes, Commander and Queef. You want to count them? Commander and Queef.
That's it.
What survived through every single change was the dynamic between the two of them.
Piece of shit. Just say you can't do it. I won't. You won't say you can't. You, Morty. You.
That relationship was already there in the original one, and it's still the entire foundation of the show. Most people assume South Park started when the show first aired, but these four boys had already existed years before the series was ever made, and the gap between what they looked like then and what they eventually became is honestly one of the biggest visual transformations on this entire list. Not just in terms of visuals, but also their personalities also shifted so far from the original.
With a corncob pipe and a button nose and 2 eyes made out of coal. For when they placed it on his head, dude! What?
Starting with Cartman, because Cartman is the most interesting case out here by a significant distance. In the original one, the character who would eventually become Cartman was originally named Kenny. He was a little bit skinnier and more rectangular than the newer version that the whole world came to know. And his hat had a small, messy blue pom-pom that looked nothing like the clean circle sitting on his head today. The most notorious manipulative villain in cartoon history was originally called Kenny. Can you believe that? Then there's Kenny, the actual Kenny, whose original version in the early short was barely a character at all. The orange parka he always wears in the prototype was a flat triangle shape with a jagged black hole for a face with no real design behind it. Kenny existed mostly just to die and then show up again, which was the entire joke at that point.
You know, I don't think that was the real Santa Claus.
And coming to Stan, he was the one in the original shorts that was the closest to the modern self out of all four, which is either a compliment to how clearly he was conceived from the beginning, or just a sign that nobody had strong opinions about Stan specifically. The hat he wore had a much thinner red trim and a tiny pom-pom that looked hand-cut, and his jacket was a flat dark brown, rather than the lighter tan it eventually became. The overall look was rougher, but it was totally clear that it's the same person. What changed more specifically with Stan was his role.
Hey, Wendy! You're a bitch. Token? Right here, buddy.
Yeah, that's right, he became that guy on the show. Moving on to Kyle, he had the most dramatic visual change from the entire list. The original version of Kyle wore a green jacket and a yellow pom-pom hat. And if you put that version next to the modern Kyle without any context, you would have absolutely no idea that they were supposed to be the same character. The modern Kyle wears a bright orange jacket and the green ear flap hat that became one of his most recognizable features. But nothing about the original design carried over except his body shape. What's also interesting about this one is the back and forth that Carl and Stan always do.
You know, I don't think that was the real Santa Claus. Oh, no shit, Sherlock. Thanks to you, there's not gonna be any Christmas, and there's no one left to help us.
They're always seen arguing over Eric's dead body.
God! Frosty killed Kenny! Dude, I told you not to put that fucking hat, now didn't I? Well, I'm sorry, Mr. Rocket fucking Scientist.
Honestly, all of this just reminds you that even the things that we see as perfect today didn't begin that way. They took time, mistakes, and a lot of reworking. And maybe that's the part we don't talk about enough. And if you think about it, we've only covered the changes that appeared on screen. There's a lot more that would have happened behind the scenes. Which character's transformation surprised you the most? Drop it in the comments because we genuinely want to know. And if there's a character transformation that we missed that belongs on this list, please tell us below. Subscribe and we'll be back very, 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 very soon. Cheerio!